point in the struggle with the Maccabees against the Syrian Greco armies, where between 2,000 or 5,000, maybe up as much as 12, defeated 4 wars against the Syrians, Seleucid, and so forth, and they had up to 50,000 soldiers. So maybe it was 5-to-1 ratio. I don't know for sure. They also started that guerrilla warfare because they would hide in caves. I mentioned the other day, I've been in some of the caves. So they were in what we know as Samaria and Hebron, which is basically the actual land where Abraham was, and the Essenes and so forth. It's across the line now. We call it the disputed territories. It eventually won't be so disputed. It will be back to what God promised Abraham. But so they were really all over the Middle East. That's the point I want you to understand. And there's different things in the literature about them. So that's one source. Another source really is Dr. Sekeli. How many people have heard Dr. Sekeli? So Dr. Sekeli was really brilliant. He spoke 17 different languages. And he started a Essene movement, first Christians Essene. Now, he was Jewish. He was from Romania. He was from Transylvania. I don't think he was a werewolf. But I'm saying he was highly educated. And from 1940 to 1970, he ran a kind of a holistic kind of clinic down on the border. Actually, it was a little bit just in San Diego, but across the border in Mexico. Because he wasn't a licensed physician. He was a physician in Romania. Okay, so that's the point I'm making. So then he, in essence, retired 1740, and then he went to Mexico, and then he ended up living in Costa Rica. Actually went to his home in Costa Rica, where he left his body. And I kind of put it that way. I don't want to comment too much more about his actual lifestyle, but he did start that movement, and he cured at his place like over 115,000 people with cancer and chronic disease. So he kind of started the movement. You can say live food because that's what he kind of used. I can't say that was his diet, but that's what he used. Okay, so those are big sources. Then we also have actually reference to the Dead Sea Scrolls of 1897. This is our Tree of Life. It's kind of nice. I told you I'd show it. Notice it's got all the Sephirotic energies. You see Keter and Hikmah and Bina. Can we see that in there? Can you see that? Okay. And Essene and Gemara and Zephyr and Hod and, well, Mitzak and Hod. And then this is finally the root chakra. So that you showed, so this is nothing. So it kind of gives you a feeling for that. It's important because this actually is the symbol of liberation in the West. We don't have a lot of symbols of liberation in the Western culture. So it's kind of important to really kind of get the bigger picture. As I said this morning, the Tree of Life is the pattern of all creation. From the atom to the Milky Way to the cosmos. It's the pattern. And we were practicing with Ophanim, the Tree of Life pattern within our own bodies. Okay? And activating them. As we activate, we're activating the name of God. Now that's important because that's what the seeds did. So this is what we're talking about. So think about the Essenes as the awakened ones. Now, it's interesting, the Sufis are kind of like the scenes for, they're not necessarily in the Muslim world, but they're partly Muslim. The Sufis are a little bit like the scenes in the same kind of history going back to God Eden. So there's a trend there. So that the mystical, okay, awakened ones, eternal presence, beyond the limitations of identifying with the body and mind and self. And as we go through this, when we talk about how do we not go into apostasia, losing our center, losing our truth, you're going to see the teachings as I kind of put them together that absolutely reinforce the ability, the key Essene teaching. So who are they? They were Jewish, Kabbalistic, prophetic, mystics, and healers of the desert. They were shamans. And doers of the Torah. Right? We know that's the key. But they also saw the Torah as a path for spiritual enlightenment. And I have to add in, as we talked about yesterday, as a way to return to Gan Eden. So in this slide, we're going to make that correction. Addition. Because if we understand, as we got to yesterday, the Torah is a pathway back to Gan Eden. Okay? I talked about the 53 parshas and the 54. And when you combine yesterday's and that's and the previous one, it gets 53, and 53 is the numerology of Gan Eden. So if we're able to follow the Torah way of life, which I'm going to tell you is the Essene way of life, it is a pathway of moving into Gan Eden past that revolving sword. Because God didn't design it that people shouldn't go back to Gan Eden. No. It just said, if you're going to go back, you got to be on your toes. You got to be alert and clear. Okay? 54 is judgment. And that actually prevents you ultimately from going back. If everybody follows. 53 gives you Gan Eden. So that's just an insight.
Could you repeat that about 53?
Well, some people say there's 53 parshas.
Yeah.
Other people say there's 54. But the key is some of the parshas get combined.
Right.
And that's the key. So 2 parshas combined brings us to 53, which is the gematria, numerology of Gan Eden. So by living the Torah way of life, it gets you through and past the sword, double-edged sword. One side is 53, one side is 54. And it brings us back to Gan Eden. Now that's prior to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. But these scenes, if we can kind of think of them, we're really thinking Gan Eden. So the metaphors are helpful in terms of how to get it. So it's a path of spiritual enlightenment that on the way takes you back to Gan Eden. Literally. So that's why I call it the eternal presence, where you go non-dual dual. Eternal presence is prior to that. It includes the dual and non-dual. And into the nothing. So all of that is included in the understanding. That's kind of a key breakthrough. So basically, they give us a history that in a lifestyle, and which is Torah-centered, that takes us to Gan Eden into liberation. And I think that's the key idea to get. Okay, so think about it as a vibration rate. I'm trying to give you a thing. And part of the Essene thing is Tikkun HaNefesh, restoring to the soul, just the opposite of apostasia, and Tikkun HaOlam, healing the world. Those are part of the Essene work. They did go out into the world to do these things. Okay? And it's lineage path. So when we really talk about liberation, we talk about these energies like the Ruach HaKodesh. There needs to be a lineage energy that you draw. That's just the way it was. And I would say the first in the lineage was Hanak. Okay? Who taught, be still, know, I'm that. You've heard that before.
What was that again?
Be still and know I am that. Fundamental, the same teaching, and the teaching of liberation. I'm linking the two because that's what. So Hanak lived, you might know how Hanak lived. How,
649.
well, he lived to be 600, but he lived 3,500 years ago. He was the seventh generation from Adam. Okay? Main teaching, be still and know I am that. He was taken up alive, and then he came back down. So another concept of the scene is the idea of ascension. Okay? But be still, know I am that takes us to another key statement. Yesterday I talked about two levels of the Torah. Written Torah, oral Torah, which is expanded, helps you interpret. The written Torah can never be changed, and it hasn't. Okay? But there's a third level. Okay? The silent Torah. The Torah that comes out of your own direct apperception of the truth. So the silent Torah is the third Torah. And they did a lot of meditating. And they did that. Now, it is my term, okay? The silent Torah. But it exists. It's really the mystic understanding of it. The third level of Torah, the silent Torah. So, think Essene consciousness is that of the awakened ones. We need to understand in the lineage, I know Hanak meditated, but we again reactivate with Abraham, who was definitely a meditator, in Yitzhak, who was his son, who was known for meditating in the fields. So it's right there. It's not like, oh, it's for it, because many people don't do that anymore. They aren't making the connection to lineage, which is a meditation lineage. Okay, so I'm sorry, I said 3,500. It's 5,500 years ago that Hanak lived. And the quote is key. He walked with Yah and became whole and was not, because he was taken up. He came down, taught for, people say, maybe a year, maybe 30 days. It's hard to say, but it doesn't matter. He came back down to teach the big message and then ascended again. Okay? Now, after him, 10th generation from Adam, is Noah. Noah gets a little bit of a bad rap because he got drunk, after the ark landed and so. But he was the only one who withstood the energetics of the complete moral breakdown that was going on in those times. He was the only one to be strong. So compared today, maybe not the most luminous being, but at that point, he was the luminous being holding the energy when the rest of the world said, you're out of your mind building art. We'll just do whatever we want to do. And really some of the things, which we'll go into, are too different to what's happening today. With all the different things they've done in creating animals and humans and combining them and playing with the DNA. I mean, there's lots of stuff that are going on that were pre-fall, that were pre-flood, I mean. So Noah held, and that's really what's being asked here, is as a scene to hold the energy. To hold the energy, not go into apostasy. And these scenes were clearly about that. Okay. So he walked with God and was whole. Okay, even though he did that one time when he took too much work. The key person in our immediate lineage is Shem, also known as Melchizedek. Now, Shem and Melchizedek, as Melchizedek, became the high priest of Yerushalayim. And Shem and Eber, his great-grandson, these people live a long time. Shem lived at least 600 years. They live a long time, and they created the mystery schools to train people. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov all trained in the mystery schools. Yaakov, before he went back, I think he spent 12 years in the mystery school training. I've been in one place up in Spot where they claim one of the mystery schools was. And that is, it was a big underground cavern. So, what I want you to get that the teaching is going on and on in this whole picture. And it really comes from the book of Adam and these mystery books that they were teaching. And so lineage, key understanding is passed on to Abraham. He gets the blessing. And if you see where it says Melchizedek blesses Abraham. Shem, son of Noah. And Abraham walked before Yah as a blessing to the world. Okay, and now we're coming into a more modern, relatively modern time. That was 3,800 years ago. And that was after he defeated the 4 kings. Yeah.
What does it mean by mystery school? What is it? What is the
The
mystery
mysteries, the mystic understandings of life.
school? Okay. Thank you.
Okay? So that, I'm giving you the little bit of the lineage because you can understand. So anyone who gets an Essene initiation for me, because I'm obviously holding that lineage, is all of the order of Melchizedek. Because we have Abraham, that lineage, so anyone's Jewish is automatically of the order of Melchizedek. Do you follow what I just said? So it's key to understand the importance of lineage. It's an energetic that most people don't really get. But I'll just say this, when I'm working with people with a disrupted Kundalini from whatever, last 3 or 4 years it's Kundalini and ayahuasca don't get along so well. I reconnect them to the lineage, okay? And, with the Shakti pot and honey hot, and that is a key place of, again, bringing them back into balance. So lineage has real energy, I want to say, okay? So, you're getting the lineage first. So, as I explained, if you're, in the lineage of Abraham, you're automatically Melchizedek. But in what we're doing here, when we initiate somebody, as I say, they become of the lineage of Melchizedek as well. Any questions about that? Okay.
Well, so then if you're, are you saying if you're already Jewish that you,
You're already the order of Melchizedek.
yeah, so then you don't, we don't need your blessing? I don't want to say it. We don't need your,
No, you don't need to be initiated because you're already part of that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, but you don't need to. Okay? So basically, we're looking at a mystical, prophetic tradition. That's it. That's what we're saying, and it's Aliyah, the rising up of consciousness. That's what we're talking about. And the Essenes, they were very modest. They lived completely collectively, and they were in that non-causal love and joy and peace. That was their great wealth, non-causal contentment, and spiritual awareness. They lived in the ecstasy of the divine. So they were remarkable in that way at those times, holding energy pretty much against the chaotic disruption that was going on with the Romans and how people were doing. All that is kind of part of the role, and that's why it's our role, no matter how small we are, it doesn't matter. As I explained with the Maccabees, they were outnumbered, 5 to 1, 10 to 1. They won all the battles, and liberated the temple. Because God is behind us. We're not talking about numbers as if it's material. It doesn't matter because God intervenes. So what is the Essene way? Walk humbly and simply with God into the unknown in every moment. Okay, that's the key. Yes. The video should link to me. You will see it. So here we go with the Essene lineage. We have Abraham, we have Yitzhak, we have Yaakov to Joseph, Joseph to Moshe. Okay, then the Levites, then the Cohens, which the Cohens were Levites, but I won't go into the story, but they're from the Aaronic lineage. We have King David, King Solomon, Samuel, the great prophet, who's almost at the equivalent of Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Amos. They're all part of this lineage. And they were the ones that were a little separate, holding the energy and asking, getting people to hold the energy. They weren't armies, they weren't hundreds of thousands or millions. They were individuals standing a little bit separate, okay? Holding the energy, trying to bring people back to the truth. That's Elijah standing up to Ahab and Jezebel. You see what we're saying here? That's kind of what we're talking about. Don't count numbers. So Abraham, I would call him the quintessential Essene, because he did everything. And his teaching was Lech Lecha, go to the south. I mean, that's what God told him to do. And so he went to the south. He left all his attachments. He didn't leave his family. He left his attachments, so it kept him thinking clearly, and went to the promised land. But God didn't tell him where it was, just say, go. So he had to have that faith. Okay? And he kept his tent open in all four directions. So he was open to harmony and peace in all the directions. To go to the cosmic self was really his directive. So here are the three key Essene teachings. Hanak, be still, know and be still and know I am that. Got it? Be still and know I am that. That's the great teaching. And that's the Hanak in a certain way is the most clear beginning of this energy. Although others will say it goes back maybe to Kali. And then I am the invisible law without beginning or end. That is the eternal presence. So there's a cosmic law that we're aligned with, but it also says without beginning or end. So if it's out beginning or end, it's beyond infinite. Forget that. And don't borrow the eternal for that which dieth in now. No, that's, I think, that's an important one. What does it mean? Don't give up the truth for some temporary fulfillment, which is what we see in Hollywood, as we talked about. We don't necessarily go back into that. But people are giving up their soul, literally, for fame, money, power, and influence. Making conscious decisions to do it, the Faustian agreement. Okay, so we don't do that. That's what these scenes are doing. So I'm going to say that. Be still and know I am that. The key thing, teaching of Hanak. And then I am the invisible law without beginning or end. And don't barter that which is eternal for that which dies in it. Are there any questions about that? Yes.
What was unique about Samuel that put him close to the status of Moses?
His total being, presence, and spiritual power. He also gave Shakti power. That's Moses.
What does Shakti mean exactly?
There is exactly gets you in trouble, but
Well,
Shakti. So Haniha, or Shmika Mashefa, which is the Hebrew term for it, is the passing on of the lineage energy and the awakening of the spiritual energy, which which we call Kundalini, which in Hebrew we call Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit.
Coming down to practice, if we don't have time to do anything a day, let's assume, it's good enough if we can do that 10-5 breath as many times as we can, wherever we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
But then, if you don't have the time to do anything, you have to look at, maybe I'm bartering the eternal for that with diet and milk. This way.
Yes.
Don't barter the eternal for that with diet and milk. So if you don't have time, you have to look at why you don't have time. That doesn't allow you to keep tuning into the eternal. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the key. It's a key thing to ask yourself, because when you don't have time, it's actually you are doing this one. Don't barter that which is eternal for that which dies. Yes.
Of all the individuals that are part of this lineage, is there any particular one that you feel the most harmonized with?
Well,
And if so, why?
okay, is that a multiple choice question?
Two-part question.
Yeah. I have a particular connection with Abraham. When I did my Aliyah into Israel, I stayed in a half cave, actually, more in the sun than in a cave, in a cliff overlooking the Dead Sea. And at one point, I heard the sheep and the bells of the different animals. This is the middle of the night, okay? They weren't there. And then an image of Abraham appeared. Physically appeared. And didn't really identify himself, but basically just communicated that Abrahamic love. And 30 seconds later, disappeared. So I definitely had a different connection. Aliyah was when you actually kind of become part of Israel. There's no ceremony. I made my own. So I just was there for 3 days without water, 3 days without food or water. People panic and they can die in a day. This happens all the time in Israel if you're in the desert. But I wasn't about to panic, right? So I'm just up in this little cliff in a little place. It turned out to be a cave, a little cave, where I guess some people had done spiritual practice. And later, when I found that out, so I just found this cave above Arad, which is the town, and the Dead Sea, and just stayed there for 72 hours. I was a little longer, about maybe 76 hours, and then Shanti and friends came to find me again. So I had this very special connection with Abraham. He's the one that appeared.
Did he say anything to you?
He transmitted the power of Abrahamic love, which is the
Abrahamic
tent
love.
being opened in all 4 directions. Open to everybody in all ways.
What does the tent symbolize? The tent?
His tent is where he lived. They didn't have houses, they lived in tents. And you see there, those are walls to the tents.
Yes.
He always had his walls up. Open to everybody. The symbolism is open to everyone. And he was the first, he was a rebel, okay? He was the first to stand up against the Babylonian empire, okay? And he debated with the king who really wanted to conquer the world, and he won the debate. The result of that is he got thrown into the fire. The fire was so hot that the soldiers who threw him in disintegrated, but he was fine. So after that happened, then he decided he probably should get out of town. This is in Ur. And so that's when the migration began. So, and then he was a great warrior. He defeated the four kings with a few of his soldiers. And that was when Melchizedek gave him the lineage. But he was the first one to wake up to the personal God. God had always there in the impersonal, cosmic beingness. That was kind of always there in a way. But he was the first to take on the direct personal relationship with Hashem. That's the key. So those are some of the qualities. He's a great spiritual warrior. He had total faith in God. He was willing to walk into the unknown. And he really, in a sense, started the whole lineage, the Jewish lineage. He's the father of that. Moses was a great being too, but so I don't want to spend all the time talking about it. If you have one other question that's related.
Well, I guess the main question would be, is there any particular place on the web or document where you discuss this experience as detailed as possible?
I'm not sure.
And I guess the
Yeah.
last thing I want to know, this physical image you saw, was it just visual or did you actually get to touch it anyway?
Visual. Okay. So, more on the Essene teachings. All the ills which men and women suffer are caused by those things outside of us. Well, what is within us can never make us suffer. Any thoughts about that? So if you're in the place of the truth of the self within you, you're not going to be so affected by what's outside. Rabbi Akiva, who was a very famous rabbi, who stood up against the Romans in 132 AD, eventually was captured by them because they outlawed the teaching of the Torah, and he was teaching it publicly. And so they were, and he was about 108 or 116, something like that. And so they were torturing him and peeling off his skin with hot rods and stuff like that. And just before he dies, he says the Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu Echad, and he moves his body. Okay, so he's an example of that liberation awareness that says whatever's going outside has nothing to do with me. The Romans could not understand that he was smiling. I wanted in my life to be able, when I leave my body, to be totally at one no matter what else is happening. Roughly is what he said. And here I'm doing it. And my last words have been tested, put to the little fire, and I'm able to leave with that last breath, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu Echad, and then a voice ringing out from the heavens, well done, Akiva. So we've got to get the mystical thing, because we are talking mystical, we are not talking logical. Okay? Yes?
Sounds like Viktor Frankl.
A little bit, but way beyond. I would say way beyond. So, another Essene teaching, so that was the Essene teacher of righteousness. It was kind of like a position, it wasn't a person. Okay? It was like the leader. That's what the teaching is. And that I took out of pretty much, Dr. Seki wrote about at least 4 books about the Essenes, and I think it's from book 2. And then all suffering comes from attachment, desire, and ignorance of what is real and unreal. That sounds like a Veda Vedanta. The truth is, these are very deep teachings that are universal. So if we can't distinguish, in Hebrew we call it berur, B-E-R-U-R, which is the ability to distinguish between the real and unreal in your life. Okay? It's a really important thing. So this is the kind of thinking that they were doing. You know, this is like very deep, very profound thinking. So we have, say, K, Temple of Giza, Rabbi Zalman Schachter found some hints of the Dead Sea Scrolls there, 1897. And they weren't really fully discovered until 1947, kind of the Jubilee type year. So, and then in 1995, at kind of our Essene last big kind of international Essene conference, I shared kind of the 4 teachings, which I'll get to in a moment, and also the Yud K Vav K meditation, okay, that you've been doing, okay, Yod, K. So I shared that, which was there's about 8 Essene groups at that time, and they all acknowledged this is true for us. So here are the Essene principles that I shared with people. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, God is many in the one. Teshuvah, the point of life, return to God and know the self. God dwells within you and as you, but also all creation was the dance of God. So that was the second principle. Tikkun ha'olam, participate in the healing of the world and the spiritual transformation of the world. There are 2 levels of understanding that. And 4, shalom, the 7 levels of peace, which I wrote a book about. So those 4 principles were accepted by, at that time, pretty much all these Essene groups in this country. And one group from India. Okay. And any questions about those 4 principles, because they're pretty comprehensive, but really consolidate the energy of the Essene into just 4 guiding principles.
What are some techniques or ways to participate or to share Tikkun Olam? What can you do?
Well, the key is Tikkun HaNefesh, work on yourself first, and then we'll be talking about some of those things later today. Okay. Any other questions?
I know you said you wrote a book about the 7 levels, but could you just mention them?
The 7 levels of peace. Peace with the body, which is the kind of the live food. When I say live food, I always qualify that I also eat vegan, plant-based only. Not everybody gets that. There's some people who try to eat live animals, and that's against the rules, incidentally. But I remember some people in Hawaii. I just heard about them. I know their community. The Big Island, and they were fishing, and they ate a fish live, and 2 of them died because the fish was poisonous. So you want to just stay with plant-based live foods. Okay?
So it shouldn't be moving.
Shouldn't be moving. Right.
Shouldn't have a face either.
Or have a face. Yeah. Okay.
For a mother.
And the second is peace with the mind, which is the meditation. The third is, I'm going to say, peace with the family, also sacred relationship, which in the West is a very important part of the spiritual path. And then peace with the community, and that's having the right détente or interface with the community. Peace with all cultures, the rock people, I'm using Native American term here, the rock people, the plant people, the animals, and the humans, and then all the different human cultures. Those are and then peace with the ecology, which is spiritual ecology, which we talked a little bit about yesterday too. And then when I talked about Torah veganism, remember the star and the peace of the cultures, Al Tashit, don't create waste and so forth. and then peace with God. So those are the 7 levels. Okay, so any other questions? Because these Essene principles kind of capture the essence. Now we're going to get up to 91 different ones, but I'm just kind of giving you the 4 principles here. So that's what was accepted by all the Essenes from all the different backgrounds. Yes.
For number 3 and like the idea of God merging, is the end goal for everyone to merge with God and be in that spiritual?
Yes.
Okay.
It's,
So we
it's
have
the
to
big
first bring
dharma.
it down to the earth to teach how to live on earth.
Yes.
Then,
Well, by God merging doesn't mean you disappear, where you're like Enoch taken up, right? It was no more. It means there's 2 levels of liberation. One is self-realization, and there's God merging, God realization. There's a spectrum. So liberation means self-realization at the minimum, but then it continues to merge with God. There's very few people like that. I'm right now working 16th edition of my book, Into the Nothing, and I talk about how I had after Prakashananda acknowledged me, he also set me up to meet be with a God merged being. So he was just lying there. It's like they wasn't going anywhere. It was just there in the kind of the divine presence. He was the other, Muktananda was one, and he was the other disciple of Nityananda, who was also God merged. So that's a spectrum. That's rare. It's rare at the God merged level, but that's our destiny, ultimately. We're just a little slow getting there.
Are there stories of people that are God merged that then come kind of back into the culture and then retreat again? In other words, when you were sent up there, you were just in the presence of that. But
When I was sent up where? So,
you said just before you said.
oh, what? I said self-realization is like the first step, okay? And then God merging is where you're immersed all the time. You're just part of the cosmos. You really can't walk around too much. You can a little bit. Sai Baba of Shirdi, not the present Sai Baba, it used to take him an hour to walk 50 hours. Okay, if you kind of get the dimensions of that. You're not moving too fast because you're one with everything. So you're experiencing everything as you're walking along. When Nityananda was also got merged, and again, he didn't walk around too much. When Sputnik was released, whatever the Russians did it, like before it hit the news, he's just lying there in meditation. Sputnik, Sputnik. What are you talking about? Nobody even knew what he was talking about. But he was experiencing it as part of the wholeness. It wasn't being psychic. It was just a change in the cosmic flow. Does that make sense? So that's what we're talking about. Okay. Any other questions about this? These are pretty critical. Yeah.
So in that state, is that do they still have a purpose? Is their purpose to radiate? Is it a self-purpose?
Everybody's purpose is a little different, but generally you're radiating consciousness. So I just was there. He acknowledged my presence. And he was there. I was privileged to be there for an hour. Prakashana was showing me there's more to this than just self-realization. There's a whole spectrum. And he himself said, well, I'm in the middle there, in that class. But here, go sit with this guy and see what's going on. So you get the full picture.
Did you feel something?
Oh, yeah,
Is
there's-
your goal would that be like your goal here?
It's not my goal, but if it happens, it's not something you can have it as a goal. It's the ultimate dharma, but it can't be a goal because your ego gets away and limits it. Okay, anything else about the 4 principles? Okay, because this is a really key Essene teachings. And unfortunately, and I'll just say it, is that there were lots of different Essene groups who really aren't, even though everybody agreed that this is the core, you know, nobody's really talking about it in the same way. I remember before I kind of knew much about Essenes, we met a few Essenes, and their big issue was they used wooden spoons rather than metal spoons, and they were white. Basically, they were vegan, and they made a big point about all our silverware is wood, which is more natural than more white. In other words, there are different interpretations of what it means to be a Essene.
And who are these?
Just some people claiming to be a Essene.
Okay.
I'm trying to make a point, is that if you aren't doing these 4 principles, and I'm going to share them in 91, it's just a game that you're playing. You know, it's a way of egoically feeling good about yourself.
About the 4 principles now, do you have to practice them on a daily basis, like
It's an
recite the
awareness.
Shema, or just awareness?
It's an awareness. That's the way to think.
And for the Shema, is it important to recite it 3 times a day?
2, 3 times a day, yeah.
2, including the Vahaka?
Well, let's say 3, at least 3 times.
Including the Vahaka as well.
Okay, so here's the 91 teaching. And then B'nai Aliyah, that's the whole concept of children of ascension. That's who, in a sense, the spiritual definition of these things. So we have to ascend in our consciousness. B'nai Aliyah, the first, most obvious was Hanak, because he did ascend. There are in the Jewish lineage 10 people who are taken up alive in that day. One was actually Pharaoh's daughter, who then became a disciple of Moses. Okay, and there's also 10 in the yogic tradition as well. Tukaram was taken up chanting, Mirabai was taken up chanting the name of God. So it's not something that's just peculiar to the Torah tradition. The different traditions of people in their holiness can be taken up by. Doers of the Torah, that's more of a functional definition, whereas B'nai Aliyah is a spiritual definition. Okay? Any questions about that? So fundamentally, the Essene level that we're talking about is doers of the Torah. So, and in that context is that that walk, the Torah walk, is seen as a path to liberation and enlightenment. Okay? And ultimately, it creates the environment where the Messiah may come. Well, the Messiah may come anyway, it doesn't matter, but we create a better environment. So, the Baal Shem Tov, during the High Holy Days, went up, he ascended, that's probably what he did, and he met with the Messiah. He said, well, when are you coming? And the Messiah said, when your teachings have spread throughout the world. Okay, that's, okay. So living the 10 speakings, we understand that there were never commandments, they were speakings, they were teachings. We had to take a commitment to live that. Okay? Shomar Shabbat, that's one of the 10 speakings, honoring the Shabbat. Okay? As a day of enlightenment, as basically the activation of the Shekinah energy, which is the sacred feminine energies. So, here we go. One of the things is that we're probably the only Essene group that actually practices the Shabbat in the full way of holding it. So people put on the mantles of this, that, and the other thing, but are not following the fundamental principles and the lineage from where it comes. So honoring the Shabbat, you can't call yourself an Essene if you aren't going to honor the Shabbat.
What are the fundamental principles of Shabbat?
First of all, to do it.
Okay, like light the candles and not.
Yeah, it's doing it. And no work during that 24 to 25 hours. You're lighting the candles, you're doing the challah, and you're focusing on God. You're putting a day aside to focus on God. It's not that, it's a lot because, you don't drive in a car and you don't do certain things. Obviously, people teach on Shabbat, if they're teaching spiritual things. That's it. It's sacredness in time. Yes?
For non-Jewish, what's left for us is just to put a day aside for God.
No. You have to do it in alignment with the Shabbat. So
we have to
it's
learn.
practicing Shabbat, which is Friday night to Saturday. You have to see. Remember, how do things get holy? God proclaims this space is holy. Okay, that's good. God proclaims this time is holy. Shabbat is holiness in time. So it merely means Friday night to Saturday night. It doesn't mean Sunday. That's what the Pope did. Because the Pope is saying, I'm bigger than God. You follow what I'm saying? And it is open to everyone. But it is Friday night, Saturday night, sunset to sunset. Does that make it a little clearer? Then you can't just pick any
we need
day.
just to be taught how to do it.
And for me, part of the training, the way I'm planning how it's set up, although people are taught how to do it, is really for someone to be here for 2 months. That puts you through 8 Shabbats. It's pretty direct training. So that's kind of the idea. Okay, any other questions about that? Okay. Merging the heavens and the earth, the heart and the mind, integrating. So that's the prayer we start with, okay? And see what the Essenes did is they, in a sense, brought peace, brought the awareness of God into all creation. And that's key. In other words, it's not the material world. The Cartesian model, which says animals are just machines, doesn't honor that animals have souls. Torah teaches animals have souls. Really should be eating them. And as you saw yesterday, there is no halakhic, the walk, a way that justifies even, that demands eating meat even on holidays. So that's an important thing to kind of understand. So what they did is sanctify everything. Shmidi Sim Lendi Tamid. What does that mean? It means see God before you always. It's just a way of being in the world. You follow where I'm going. When we've asked our questions about how do you do this, what do you do? This is it. This is like the game plan that comes out of the Torah. It's like, fine, see God all the time. And that is the key principle, see in all creation. Amud Shikra is the illusion that God is not in the world. Did you follow that? It's the illusion of not that God doesn't exist in the physical plane. That's the problem with the Maya concept in the Vedic, is the world is just an illusion. No, behind that illusion of the physical is the Spirit of God. That's the key, and a very important difference. So, just saying that. So we sanctify all creation by living, acting, and eating in holiness. And we talked about the practice of eating yesterday. Same principle, right? It is the principle of eating in holiness. That's kashrut, the real meaning of kashrut, or kosher. You see where this is going? You see what we're talking about? So we're going through how to live in the world to bring the presence of the divine, to activate the presence of the divine in the world all the time. You sit in your house, walks by the way, lays down, rises up. That's what we're talking about. So that's what I'm talking about. So, Shavidi Yashim Labid Tameh means see God in front of you always. It's Psalm 16:8. See God in front of you always. So there's a little bit of overlapping because, sanctifying all creation is the same thing as that. So, but the word is Habot Nidu, which is contemplating. Habot Nidu is meditating. So, Deviku, merging with God. That's a goal, it's a principle. Happens most easily in meditation. Habot Nidu is meditation, as I just explained. They meditated. The best we can tell, they worked for 4 hours, meditated, prayed for 4 hours, and did their other things for the 4 hours in their cycle of the day. Histalkut, dying into nothing. Now I pick key words because I'm trying to make the point that this just isn't me, kind of making this up. If there's a word for it, they obviously had to be doing it, right? Histalkut, they have a word for it, dying into nothing. I didn't make that up as my thing. Somebody else, thousands of years ago, understood that and made the word for it. And it's into the ayin. Okay, the nothing. Then from the nothing is the Ein Sof, EIN, and that's the bridge from nothing to the something. And the something then is creation. Time, space, and ayin. So that's what we're talking about. Heirut is enlightenment. Bitul ha'ash is emptiness. So it's an experience of emptiness where anything can, you can be in that sense of the divine as it's happening. So, Yud Vav Kei, that's the Hebrew for it right there. Invisible law without beginning or end, Gospel Book 2. And point of life is David Kut Herui, which is the big point for everything. Any questions about any of this?
Could you explain the invisible law without beginning or end a little more?
Yeah, it's prior, it's beyond infinity. It's the endless awareness of the one, which I also call the eternal presence. Okay, we have the eternal presence, and that's beyond dual and non-dual. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the eternal presence is an easier word than all that. It makes it clear. The soul is pure, the soul is immortal, and the soul incarnates. Now, in the Torah tradition, in the oral Torah, there's 5 levels of soul, not just one soul. And all those 5 levels don't all incarnate together. It's a little complicated. And the Eastern tradition, it's just one soul that incarnates. But here we have 5 levels of soul. Nefesh is what? Ruach, the wind. Okay. Neshama, which you heard me mention about the lighting of the lights. The 3rd, that's the individual soul. Haya is the oversoul that connects you to everyone else. We're all part of the Haya. And Yehida is the part of the soul that's hardwired into the divine. And in the incarnation process, which is far more complicated than the Eastern, I can't say it's better or worse, it's more complicated for sure, is that different parts of your soul at one point will then can incarnate as 2 or 3 different people at another point. And that definitely is confusing. But that is the teaching. Usually the upper 2 are stable, but the lower 3 are the ones that may vary. So think 5 parts of the soul, 5 levels of soul. Okay? But it should be very clear that incarnation is part of this story. Why am I making a point about that? Anybody have any idea? So if you don't incarnate, then there's no potential for spiritual evolution.
What does it mean by incarnate?
When your physical body dies, the 5 levels of the soul go off, and then they come back together in a new body as a baby.
How does that differ than reincarnate? So the same,
Didn't-
reincarnation,
Reincarnation is the same thing.
same thing, okay.
Yes.
Is the goal to become evolved enough that you eventually don't reincarnate? Or is it always?
It's an interesting question. My answer is, from a Jewish point of view, everyone has to ascend. Everyone has to be B'nai Elohim. So even though you are fully liberated, you have to keep coming back until everyone has a sense. Now, in the yogic tradition, sannyas kind of does the same thing. So you can choose to go off down the river. This is part of the ceremony. You walk down the river. But if you're coming back to be a bodhisattva, you turn around and come back. So you choose in that moment, again, the path of reincarnation to everyone is liberated. That's the meaning of the bodhisattva. Does that answer your question?
So everyone together ascending means no more incarnations.
Correct.
Is that the reason possibly why the cosmos seems so quiet? The people that reach a certain level of technological civilization complexity ascend?
No. Because they did that before the flood, too. They were putting animal heads on humans and human heads on animals. They were doing all kinds of technical things. They weren't ascending because they were stuck in the material plane.
Forgive me, but I'm not sure that you understood the question on my point.
Could
What I'm
be.
saying is people are searching for ETs. The cosmos seems very quiet except for us.
It isn't. ETs are not relevant in the spiritual path. Are there other civilizations? The Torah will say yes. Were there previous civilizations? Yes. Were there ETs? Yes. Guess what? Adam and Eve, as the oral tradition says, came onto the planet's energy fields, and then they didn't quite, they fell and they became physical. But they came from the constellation of Libra. So there is definitely a statement that there are other beings out there who are at different levels of evolution. That's as far as I'm going to go with that right now. Because it's every one of these topics is hours of lecture. You understand that, right? So I'm trying to give you this all in an hour and a half, which we probably won't do. Probably do a little longer. Go ahead.
In your awareness, as you speak of this particular patterning of reincarnation and processing of the soul, do you know if we might interact and go to other dimensional states and then come back here again?
Yes. That's the concept of the many mansions. Think of it as just a bigger process of evolution. Spiritual evolution is many mansions and many levels. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the soul is pure, it's immortal, and it keeps going. Eventually it all merges back into the one. Do people know what that means? Is it a 7,000-year cycle? Could be. Don't know. And then another thing that the scenes had for sure was Omet, spiritual courage, Kavod, spiritual honor, which we don't exactly see so much in the world today. But spiritual honor is a big deal. And it's part of the evolution. You don't just get it. Things have to build. You have to develop that spiritual honor. Okay. Called spiritual character. Musar means the Torah, morals, ethics, and virtues. In other words, you have to develop as a person. Spirituality isn't separate from developing as a person. Very important to see the principle. Avut, the economics to support the spiritual development, whatever that happens to be. A lot, a little doesn't matter. The key is you're in right relationship with it. Having a lot of money doesn't necessarily, as Jesus said, a rich person has as much chance of getting to heaven as a camel to the eye of a needle. That's only if you're aware. So wealth becomes a challenge. Are you using it to uplift humanity? Are you using it to support your spiritual life? You see what I mean? Or are you using it to buy a yacht or whatever you're doing? Okay. Love thy neighbor as yourself. You've heard that one before, right? Where do you think that came from? It didn't come from Jesus. It came from Leviticus 19:18. Do remember that Jesus was Jewish and he did study the Torah. And he's quoting the Torah there. Love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. Okay? But to love your neighbor as yourself, you have to have a love of yourself. And understand that our soul is immortal. We are that spark. Any questions about that? Yes,
So Jesus was part of this Melchizedek tradition and lineage,
absolutely.
along with King David and King Solomon.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So it's good to kind of understand where some of these things come from, because people think that's an original. It's not. Okay. Supporting people in their process towards liberation. So when you can hold your place like Samuel the prophet did, it supported other people to evolve. And he actually gave, the Shmika B'Sheph to David, and actually King Saul and his men, and they were going after David, but they all got, Shmika B'Sheph, and they forgot about chasing after David. It's an interesting use of Shakespeare, but okay. Helping people overcome the Yetzer Hara. What is the Yetzer Hara? The evil urge. So the more we can hold that energy, you see, the more the prophets could hold the energy, then they could influence other people to hold the energy. And the scenes were very messianically focused. Okay? And so that's part of what they did. Now, we don't know for sure, but it appears John the Baptist was Essene, and his cousin. Who's John the Baptist's cousin?
James.
James and Josh.
Jesus. And that some of the literature suggests he actually did study with the Essenes until he was 30. There's some literature also suggests that he had an Essene marriage with Mary Magdalene. That's a 7-year celibate marriage. But other things may have happened also. The point I'm making is something a little different, that he was kind of in that tradition. And then at the age of 30, then which is the Essene tradition, he started teaching. So when did Jesus start teaching? Age of 30. And then he taught for 3 years. But the point I'm trying to make is that the Essenes didn't obviously worship him, he was trained by them. It was a little different. He was also trained by Hillel the elder, not the same Hillel, but a different, very important. Gamaliel the elder, who was a great rabbi. So he didn't just come out of the blue. He was like really holding those energies. So it's important to be aware of that too. Any questions about that?
So I think you said you were the Pharisee. Is that
I said a scene of what was Jesus a Pharisee? Jesus was a Pharisee and he was in the scene.
so you're Pharisee.
Hillel, the elder, was a Pharisee and was in the scene. They kind of moved back and forth. The Pharisees were more public, the scenes were more removed. If that makes sense. Yes.
Could you just repeat and go over Avut again?
Arvut?
Yeah.
It means whatever you're doing in your personal dharma, you make enough money to support your spiritual life. A lot or little doesn't matter. It has to support your spiritual life.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions? We go on.
You're talking about the 5 levels of soul,
Yes.
but I don't know them. Would you mind repeating them? Or
Sure.
saying them?
Nefesh is the soul level of the physical body. Ruah is the breath, the yah, the breath quality. Astral plane. Neshama is your individual soul spark. Haya is your oversoul that connects you to all people. And Yehida is the aspect of your soul that directly links you to the divine. Now, all levels link you to the divine, but Yehida is like your hardwire. You're never separate from the divine. Okay, you are. Yes.
Did I hear you say Jesus had a 7-year celibate marriage with Mary Magdalene?
It appeared to be what some of the history suggests. I'm not making that, saying that's true. I'm just saying it appears that's in there. There's a lot of stories, so we don't really know what happened. Okay.
And by the same line, he may have had children with her, but whether he did or didn't is ultimately irrelevant.
Right, but just to be clear, they did find the tomb where Jesus was buried and Mary Magdalene was buried and their son was buried. That is in the Israeli authorities won't let it explore it any further, so it's all kind of literally covered up. But I know the person who actually found that tomb. So he feels it's very authentic. It was deep kind of in the earth. It was hidden. And part of that story is how can that be? He rose, da, da, da. Other people historically think Jesus died at Masada as the last stand. We don't know, but their tomb was there, and it clearly talks about, Jesus, son of, very clear. You couldn't mistake it. It was that, and Mary Magdalene, and that son. I guess he died when he was 7 or something. So that's all I can tell you.
Is that inconsistent with the resurrection after the 3rd day story?
That's
You
the
tell
reason
me.
Some thinking he had more children.
Yeah, it obviously is inconsistent.
What was the
Now,
name?
could he arise? Yeah, and I think that too.
I recall reading somewhere in one of your books, I think Spiritual Nutrition, you made a reference to his walking through walls, something like that, having a spirit body after his death.
Yeah, well, I mentioned the idea of, because it's in the yogic tradition, we have that too. People die, they materialize, they can do certain things, they can teach and do that. As I already mentioned, my experience with Abraham. So it's all possible. That's what I'm saying. I'm not denying anything, but I'm saying it's maybe a bigger picture.
What's the name of the documentary that we watched?
Yeah, I know.
James.
James, no, it wasn't James the brother of Jesus. It was really by him, but I can't think
James Cameron was the producer.
of it. Yeah, can't think of it right now.
You can Google
But
it.
didn't you watch the
James
big
Cameron.
archaeologist lost to
Yeah.
Jesus? I think that's what it.
Yeah, I did show, thank you. I did show him the lost tomb of Jesus, reporting about that.
Lost to
So if I understand what you're talking about, Jesus' physical body dies, the body stays there, so the resurrection is a spirit body.
That is one interpretation. Another interpretation is, which is very real, he went into an altered state, which we know in yoga exists, and he appeared to have died, and then these mysterious people came and kind of worked on him, if you recall, right? Who were probably Essenes, and they got him out of that situation, because he wasn't dead, but he was like in a coma, so to speak.
Near death.
A coma, yeah, and then he, by the Romans, disappeared, and then they saw. And then on the way back, as I explained, it's good to review this stuff. When they came back to recapture Jerusalem, there.
The Essenes, right?
No, when the British in 1917, they first recaptured Masada, and 4 years later they recaptured Jerusalem. Meaning, first it went with Jerusalem to Masada, and now it's going reversing it. So it's pretty fascinating, God's play. You can go to Masada now. It exists. You can walk up to the thing and you can see all the things. It was kind of a Roman kind of castle, so to speak.
And there's some thought that some of the Essenes fled, but all of them died.
Yeah, well, that's the point I'm making. You see, the Romans wiped out Qumran, and the scenes kind of spread around the world, but they also went to Masada. Kind of did a lesson. History, it's a little hard to trace everything, but the problem is. But these are somewhat congruent stories. Okay. So, in the days, so are we in the end of days times? Well, there is a suggestion it's the case, because the general prophecies suggest end of days will be marked when Israel returns to the land and activates it. That's obviously happened. And then there will be a general apostasia, a falling away from the truth. Now, these are issues I brought up, but that pretty much takes us to we're in the end of days scenario, whenever that is. Somebody said maybe it's the next Jubilee. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because our role is to stay strong in the self and connect to God. Whatever happens, happens. It's not a problem, really. Our problem is to stay tuned in to the truth of who we are. That's why the Essene teaching is so important, because it outlines every level and every step of all the things you can do. That's the point. So exactly what the end of the day said, doesn't matter. What matters is, are we present in the truth when all that happens? That's what matters. Okay. So, and that is being lived by the 6 foundations and 7-fold peace. So I just gave you the 7-fold peace. The 6 foundations are another way of putting some of this together. So it's foundation 1 is at least an 80% mindful diet. You can do 95, 98% better. Fasting once or twice a year for at least 7 days to keep clean, because our environment is so toxic around the world. 2, practices that build the prana, build the life force, yoga, tai chi, qigong, sacred dance, Maybe it builds it, because when consciousness expands, when prana expands, or chi expands, what happens? We expand consciousness. Third, service and charity. What does that do? It burns up different karmas that we've created, and it brings us into oneness. One thing you have to know about service and charity is you're the one being served. You're doing, yes, you're doing people a favor, but you're the one being served. Okay? Because you're burning your karmas up. Okay? And then we have working with a spiritual teacher. Everybody needs to do that. It's very clear in the Torah teachings as well as the yogic teachings. Okay? And then we have divine silence, meditation, and prayer. And repeating the name of God. We're all keeping there in that world. Okay? And that's the fifth. And the sixth foundation is as much Haniha, Shmeka Meshefa, these same words, okay, as you can get. Now, I want to be clear, getting Shaktipat even once, people have had here, twice a day, even once is sufficient, but it's a lot better to keep doing it. Why do I say live? Because it's not a practice, it's a way of life. If you say practice, it's separate from your life. That's the key concept.
Kind of like doctors practicing on you.
What?
That's true.
Kind of like doctors practicing,
Right.
practice on you.
So create and maintain the vessels to receive in order to give. So you need the vessels to hold the energy. We can talk about it as the nadis, because it's a better description, which is there's 72,000 nadis through which the kundalini, or spiritual energy, flows. You want to keep those clean. Meat, fish, chicken, dairy clog the nadis. Literally clog the nadis. And giving from the place of peace within yourself is really important. Okay? Give out of the nothing from a place of awareness. In other words, you're not doing it for ego gratification or for anything else, just because we're one. We're at the higher level of soul where all souls are connected. Tikkun HaNefesh, healing the individual soul, and then Tikkun HaOlam. So this is, I've summed up all the teachings. Obviously, this is one of the four principles. Okay, you see. Transcendence is not transcending the world. Transcendence is bringing down the spiritual into the physical world. That's what we're talking about. We're transcending the illusion of Ama Shikra, the illusion that God is not in the world, by activating that. Okay. The Baal Shem Tov used the word Yehudim. What does that mean? That means to activate the spark of God in all things. So it's a good thing. We have the Essene principles, the Shema, the meaning of one, to Teshuva, return to the self, return to God, Tikkun HaOlam, related to Tikkun HaNefesh, okay, and Shalom, creating peace in the world. Peace was a big thing for the Essenes. That's the way I start everything with, peace be with you. So they started, that's how they ended. So, I'm going to say, point 33, Essenes practice the metaphysics of transformation. Basically, it's a belief about reality that everything can be improved, everything can be made better. It's not stuck. We're not fixed. And so what the Essenes did was put the idea of transformation, which is not transcendence. Okay, transformation is changing yourself. Transcendence is when you elevate spiritually. Okay? B'nai Aliyah, children of ascension. You see what we're saying? It's good to get. And so, another way of saying it is the way things are not the way things have to be. So it's really easy to feel stuck. It's like, this is never going to change. The system is fixed, and there's not fixed, it's stuck, and there's no way we can improve life for humanity. So the scene was, it's not the way things have to be. Our work is constantly to transform and to transcend. Very important, the scene principle, and it keeps you in holiness. So everything I'm sharing about the apostasia is what we're talking about. This is the way to be in the world, no matter what. This kind of a scene understanding. Okay. This is a Torah teaching. The God of Essene is one of freedom and transcendence. Okay. Proclaim liberty throughout the land to everyone, to all its inhabitants. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We may have heard that term before. Well, that's where they got it. Out of the Torah.
Wow.
And they're inherently saying this is everybody's God-given right. No government can give that to you. It's everyone's God-given right. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which is the Torah teaching, which is the Essene teaching as doers of the Torah. So it kind of puts it together. You wonder sometimes as people are trying to do away with the Constitution, think, are we missing the point here? Because this is fundamental. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Proclaim liberty for everybody. Freedom for everybody. So you need the freedom to evolve spiritually. There's a Hebrew term, al direct ha'avda. What that means is you've got to pop out of the matrix. You have to remove yourself from all kinds of slavery. So these scenes were known as, in a sense, rebels, as Abraham was with Nimrod. Abraham stood up to Nimrod, and Nimrod said, "Don't you know I'm God?" He said, "No." Abraham said, "Okay, that's cool. Tomorrow, if you're God, make the sun rise in the west instead of the east. I don't believe you." And that is, he completely defeated Nimrod, and all Nimrod could do is try to throw him in the flaming furnace, whereas they said, he didn't get burned. Yes?
In countries where school is mandatory, children are in the matrix in school.
Correct.
So how can you help them?
Well, it depends on the school setting, but here in the U.S., we have homeschooling.
Right, but some countries it's
I
mandatory.
understand. Then what you do, because that's what we're facing with the school system, they're even trying to make homeschooling illegal. There's all kinds of things going on. Is you protect your kids by helping them to understand the situation. So you're a kid, what do you know? I mean, think about being when we were kids. What did we know? Right? Didn't know anything. I wasn't conscious. I mean, I went to public grammar school, public high school. What did I do? So today it's much more of an indoctrination issue that we're facing. Okay, we got that. Is that you have to kind of explain to your children what's going on, and that keeps them separate. Don't buy this as truth. If your teacher says there's 20 different genders, look at the Torah. There's male and female. So you got to be aware not to accept what the teachers say, because kids naturally are going to give authority to the teachers, which used to be a valid thing to do. You understand what I'm saying now? So you have to, stay grounded in this Essene truth, stay with the Torah teachings. That's been true forever, and certainly the last 3,300 years. Stay with those teachings. What's going on is temporary. You have multiple genders, you got this, that, and the other thing. It's like, we need to let go of that. We just don't need to accept that. And that's what Abraham did. Yeah, you're God. I'll buy that. Make the sun rise in the west. That's what students know. Some students in England who have actually been doing some of these things got in a little trouble because the teachers were insulted that you didn't buy the party line. And it hit the news a week or two ago. But you have to be clever about it. Yes.
Well, in that case, you can also see your child being different.
Yeah.
And not mixing too much with other children and being more and more isolated. That is a little worrying too. But at the same time, it's right and it's logic. So how to keep
You
a
have to do
balance on
both.
that?
You have to keep the balance, has to have friends, has to do different things, but also can be almost a leader in saying, well, we don't have to buy the party line. See what I'm saying? And that's kind of easy when you get to be teenagers because they naturally don't buy the party line. It's the advantage of being a teenager.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm in a sheet where you've heard me mention a few times, number 38 there, the world of illusion, which is saying it's an illusion to think God isn't in the world. It's a very important thing. It's like the world is not an illusion. The illusion is to think God isn't in the world. Anoki, the power, it's a Hebrew word to see the difference between light and dark. And Borer is between real and unreal, and Anoki is to be able to tell the difference between light and dark. Now, Essene, Karav it's important to have a spiritual teacher so you don't get lost along the way. It supports the whole process, which can be a little tricky and scary at times. The teacher supports in that way. Pretty much, that's again in the Essene teaching and the Torah teaching. All humans are interconnected, and that is when we start to understand the fourth level of the soul, Haya. It's all connected. Okay. Along with all connected is a sense of oneness. And bringing people back into oneness consciousness. That's really what the scenes we're doing. So we want to transcend our sense of ego. That's what we're talking about. So we can see the oneness. Now you need a sense of ego. Let me explain the subtlety of that one. So you need a sense of ego. What does that mean? Well, if you have body integrity, that's sense of ego. You have clarity of mind, that's sense of ego. The difference is, in our world, ego runs consciousness. But we want to flip it around, and consciousness guides ego. So ego is like your car, you're the driver. The car doesn't drive the driver drives the car. I know self-driving cars are coming out, but let's stick with the old-fashioned analogy here. And so you need a healthy ego, healthy body, you need a healthy mind, but it can't run the show. Consciousness needs to run the show. Ego needs to be perfected so consciousness can guide the ego. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
So ego's not your enemy. Ego has to be in service of your life purpose.
How do you keep it in check?
You purify it and you let consciousness guide it. In other words, how you keep it in check is you're guided by a higher awareness, and then eventually your ego then becomes your servant. So you're not keeping in check, you just flipped it. So you're guided by by the divine. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And more you're able to do that. That's the key concept. Okay, good. So the commandment or speaking is see God in all. It's a pretty important thing. We call that histobut, equal vision. Everyone has a soul. At the soul level, we're all equal. Histobut means see God in everyone. And so at that level, it's all equal. And the Essenes really practiced that pretty strongly, but they did have leaders. People who were more experienced and so forth. So we're all equal at the soul level, and everybody has different roles. Some are leaders, some are followers, some are healers, some are gardeners, everybody has different roles. So if you're the chief gardener, you're the one that's most knowledgeable. So it's a different role than a person who's learning to do gardening. But everyone's equal. Does everybody get the paradox there? Because otherwise it gets really, well, we're all equal, therefore I know as much about gardening as you, but I've never worked in a garden. That's where it gets all confused. So we have our roles, we have our training, we have our background, and we're all equal as equal souls. Amos 5:4, seek God and live. We got the 620 condensed to one. Okay. Habakkuk, the righteous live by their faith alone. Those are your key, simple guidances down to one piece. Okay. And then the teaching, don't forsake the eternal, for that would die in an hour. So have perspective on what's going on. Make your choice in perspective. And people will call it barur. And therefore understand that our happiness or sadness does not depend on anything outside of us, but what's inside. Are we in touch with the truth of who we are, the light of God? So you can see the 6 foundations, really sevenfold pages, are a modern way of doing Essene life. That's the key. So in the Essenes are both celibate and householder. At Qumran, they were celibate, we think, and the idea is they were students. The Qumran was like a little bit of a university where people went to train. Some people chose to live there, variation, but most people think. So they were healers, they called it therapeutic, they were farmers, agriculturalists, they're mystical prophets, they have a few different roles, and they're also warriors. They always, as far as I can tell, carried a sword as a way of dealing with the times. And I know when the Romans came for Jesus, Peter took out a sword and chopped off the Roman soldier's ear. Anybody know that story? Well, you have to be pretty good with the sword to do that. It's not an unpracticed person. So they were also warriors. And we need to understand spiritual life requires spiritual warriorship, but in a certain way they also have to be warriors. You know, in the way. Particularly as society gets more chaotic, it seems, you know, and like everybody else, you know, protected themselves. And every community had Essene safe houses where you could stay overnight at, or you could, you know, so wherever you were, you could kind of journey from community to community. So that was interesting. They did a lot of purification. They did a lot of mikvahs like we did the other day. That was part of their practice. And they, in the little Qumran space, they had lots and lots of mikvahs. It was like, gosh, that's a lot of mikvahs for a small space. So, faith and good works are the 2 wings of the bird. They just didn't depend on grace. You had to have faith and you had to have the good works to fly with the grace. And the idea is to live life as a blessing. Now, they were aware of the idea of this is a kind of a statement. Sin awaits at the door, but we're given the power to overcome it. So we shouldn't be discouraged. That's the message. Yeah, it's all right. Big deal. If you're in the self, you won't be distracted. And that's a part of the reason that the Torah is important, is it helps you not go near the door. Not get attracted. For them, sacred relationship was a very important part of it. I mentioned their idea of 7 years of kind of a celibate relationship. But the idea is that relationship and what it does for you helps you grow spiritually. And that was what they did teach. In fact, you couldn't actually be part of the Sanhedrin if you were, or really a rabbi, unless you were 40 and married. Because they knew that made you mature. Okay? So, all comes from God. They did not have the idea of separation of church and state. Now, that has gotten very confused in the world, because separation of church and state doesn't mean you don't have God in your school. That's not, getting God out of school is not separation of church and state. What they mean is that here we're talking about is you have to have a spiritual awareness, and then your governmental construction organization comes out of spiritual awareness. Think about that. Here we're just trying to get God so kids aren't allowed to pray in school. That is not the meaning of separation of church and state. Yes, we came from, not me, but we came from the Church of England trying to run the show, or the Catholic Church trying to run the show, and there wasn't a separation, there was a domination. Here we're really talking about God needs to be in schools as kind of a way of there. So not allowing people to pray in schools is antithetical to the whole point. It's a complete misunderstanding of the teaching. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? You know, you need to have prayer. If you can't pray over your food in school, what is going on? So we can't force people to just kind of be in a little cubicle and say, yeah, you can have your prayer, but you don't be public. Well, I know why they don't want to do it, because if you really connect to God, it's really hard to go and allowing yourself and everybody else to be enslaved. Okay. So they didn't teach us separation of church and state. They really taught more of divine guidance. So in time, every king of Israel had to have studied the Torah and have a spiritual background. They actually had to write Torah. Some people say the whole Torah, but usually just a word. But they had to read it and, as part of their leadership. So they had the spiritual understanding as well as the technological understanding or the governmental understanding. Any questions about that? Yes.
Well, one, if we just rewind a little bit, you had to be over 40 and married and male, yes? Was there ever, did the Baal Shem Tov have female students? Was there any
Yes, he
females
did.
allowed?
Yes, he did.
Um,
But he stayed within the rules. Meaning, he had them, but the rules are not in the same. You can't be alone in the same room, and then, like his daughter, which was a great student, actually often, the way because they had separation men and women, she would drop her messages, written messages to give answers to certain things. And right now, kids can't even pray over their meal. They can get in trouble. That's fascism. Does everybody get the difference there? You gotta still have God in the schools, but it has to be kind of a shared kind of thing, and you can't repress a kid from praying or reading the scriptures if they enjoy doing that. You can't do that. And that's how far it's gone, which isn't about separation of church and state. It's an inversion of the story. If you see secular government as a religion, you can see that they're actually taking over, flipping it around. Okay. All comes from God, no separation of church and state. And the dance of God is the Shekinah residing in all creation. So again, it's a spark of God in all creation is what they did it. And the whole idea for the scenes was holiness in their actions. And every action is the creation of holiness. Madad connected Madad means measure for measure. It's called the law of karma. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That doesn't mean you knock somebody's eye out or the tooth. But they did have, if you accidentally knock somebody's tooth or eye out, then there was money reparations of the value of the situation. In other words, karma. So that is a cosmic principle. So, and they saw karma as from past lives, from earlier things you did in this life, as well as immediate karma. You do something immediately, something happens. So they had different levels of understanding, but they clearly understood past life karma. There's no question about that as part of the teachings in the Torah. Again, well, I'll just leave it like that. There's a reason they try to take karma out of it, because then it means you can't undo your practice. You have to have somebody else kind of remove it from you, which makes you dependent. Okay, so they saw themselves and prepared themselves for the coming of the Messiah. So everything was about that. Part of what that seems involved with. Okay. They had some key books. I'm just going to mention the Temple Scroll, Book of Jubilees, Damascus document, Book of Hanukkah are some of the key books besides the Torah. Okay. The Essene way is the culture of life and liberation. That's another way of understanding that. Some people, it's not as clear as I'd like it to be, saw that there's an inner circle of life with vegan, and then vegetarian as the practice, intensity there. So they weren't all alive with vegans. It wouldn't be fair to say that. Okay, whatever God does for the best, all is God's will, is a very much part of the teaching. And as we live as God's will, we're part of the flow of the divine in all things. That's the key thing. But they really were honest, industrious, meditative. They were hard workers, but they were in balance. Certain amount of time for spirituality, certain amount of time for eating, certain amount of time for prayer, certain amount of time for work. And in that process, they also lived on the land away from cities, which today this is not a bad idea.
Today is difficult with all the chemicals, except for Arizona perhaps,
Yeah,
where there's
well,
no agriculture.
just stay away. But if we go organic agriculture, then the therapeutic with more emphasis on healing. They did study the different traditions, as far as I can understand, although that's more what Dr. Seiki said. They were where Qumran was like a little bit of a crossroads, and so people came through. And so there is some sense that they study the different traditions.
And
Okay,
does this group still exist, the Essene therapy?
therapeutic type. Well, the answer is yes, because the scenes do a lot of healing, not as a group. They're more out of Egypt, not as a specific group. They enjoyed movement and dance and music. And there were peacemakers, and as I already said, strong spiritual warriors, but also warriors. Like they fought alongside with the Maccabees. Abraham or 10 open in all four directions. Their concept is receive in order to share, not receive for self alone. If you are gifted, then you share that. Okay. Abnegalia, which is strict teachings of the Torah to the world, they definitely practice that. And Abnegakasi is, focus on their own Torah studies that they hold. But they did focus on hygiene and cleanliness. Okay, they took the mikvah, as I mentioned, like we did on Friday. And basically, the teaching is all suffering comes from attachment, desire, ignorance of what's real and unreal. Okay. And whether basically the teaching is only that which is beyond time, space, and beingness is real. Okay. This is a clear statement. For the way thy happiness, according to that which may befall you, is to live as a slave to the outer conditions. Okay? Live according to the angels which speak within you. And that's the inner self. Okay, so they used the word angels, that was kind of the language they used. They didn't worship angels. And I think St. Kelly kind of pushed the angel part of it. But probably the better way to say it is, but I didn't want to change the quote, okay, is live according to the guidance, the divine guidance, the higher self that's within you, your soul, activated soul conscious. That would be a more accurate way of saying it in our language today. Now this is a nice quote. In this doth happiness lie to know what is thine and what is not. So we see today people want what isn't theirs causes a problem. And if thou should desire and seek after which thou not belong to, thou shalt surely lose what is thine. So don't covet. If you would have eternal life, hold fast to the eternity with you. That's the key. Stick to the eternal soul, and everything else comes into order. Make a straight way in the wilderness. That quote needs to be more emphasized. What do you think that's about? Here's Isaiah 26.
Stay on the path.
Okay, that's part of it.
Live from it the truth within.
Yes,
Prepare for other people to walk.
all that's true. What's the wilderness?
The world, the craziness.
The chaos of the world. So he's really saying, keep your eye on the ball, be that eagle, be one pointed on that truth, and stay with that, and that is your straight path in the wilderness. Exactly the question that's come up a variety of times here, right? Is, well, okay, how do we not go into apostasy and lose our touch with the self? Stay with the Torah. Stay firm. Stay clear. Make a straight way. So, okay. And basically, I'm going to put it in the word multidimensional. They did not use that word, but it's a multidimensional awareness. It's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual as a way of being in the world. Okay? As a way of restoring balance in creation. Okay, so that brings us back to the tree of life. Okay, and you can see the separatic energies there. And Why is that important? Because Western world doesn't have, as I said before, doesn't have a model, a symbol for liberation. Tree of Life is a symbol for liberation.